Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Emily Armour. I'm in educational technology at the College of Worcester.
And I'm Missy Schen. I'm the Director of Educational Assessment and I adjunct in biology.
So we're here to talk about how everyone's favorite part of teaching is grading. And so many of you are probably familiar with this beautiful image here on the screen of these neat columns and rows. But some of you probably also use an electronic grade book, but you can see here in this example how you have perfect 100% possible points out of each item. There are no missing assignments in these columns, and it's all neat and tidy. But perhaps you're using a learning management system gradebook, which looks a little more akin to this, where you can see some highlighting in red where we have missing assignments, late work, perhaps a retake on something, but we're still kind of stuck in a traditional mode because you can see the percentages at the top of the screen.
So what if you want to be a little more inclusive in your grading scheme? You don't want to use the traditional point-based grading scheme. So some common alternatives to traditional grading would be the ones you see here on the screen. Contract grading is something we see mostly in the humanities. It was developed in English departments where a faculty member and their students create a contract based on what they all expect to be done to achieve an A, a B, a C, etc. And that contract is usually based on labors or tasks that are completed. So everything is graded on a pass, fail, or satisfactory, unsatisfactory. And then your final grade is determined by how many of those you completed. Things like participating in peer review, turning in a draft on time, turning in your final paper on time are usually some of the things that go into that. Master grading you see more in the STEM disciplines. It is more content-based. So you have a series of learning objectives that are content-based for your students, and you're looking at how many of those learning objectives students pass. Usually those assessments involve then tests or quizzes. You can have learning objectives at different levels, and so you can combine just total number of learning objectives, like 18 out of 20 gives you an A, or you could have them at different levels, or you could bundle them, and there's a variety of ways you could do that. Specifications or specs grading, which is somewhere in between the two of them. So you see it kind of across different disciplines. It's what we call assessment based. So you usually have a combination of different assessments and you're looking for students to meet a certain level of passing. Now, all of these passing is usually roughly a B level. So for specs grading, you may need to do B-level work on papers, may have to get a combination of B-level work on quizzes and such, and you're looking at how many assessments passed, or assessments passed at different cognitive levels will determine your final grade. So the nice thing about all these is they are more inclusive. Whoops. Clicking issues. They are more inclusive, but they don't fit well into an LMS. So what makes them more inclusive is they are especially inclusive for students with what we call low academic capital. So first year students, first gen students, very clear, accessible learning objectives are required for all of them. The nice thing is they have a simple grading scale, so students know if they pass or don't pass. They all have built-in opportunities for revision and retake because the idea here is for students to show you that they learned it. The final grade is then determined by a combination of past assessments. So that also is very simple and clear. And then you have to write assessments and learning goals that are very clear. So it provides a little more clarity and sometimes choice for students because they can choose what grade they want to work towards. So I have students who are seniors taking a non-majors class and they just want to get the pass. So for them, they just need the C-. They know exactly how much work they need to do as opposed to, oh, am I going to get that right grade on an exam? But there are challenges to setting up a grade book for this kind of scheme.
So how do you translate this style of grading into an actual LMS? We use Moodle here at the College of Worcester, but in Moodle, it's called activity completion. So that allows the instructor to set completion criteria on a specific assignment or activity, which could be as simple as viewing it, which is clicking on it, or receiving like a certain score. In other terms, in other LMSs, for example, might be called progress tracking or mastery learning. But what does complete mean? Well, essentially, each LMS should have a way to set up if an activity or an assignment is considered complete or not. And in this image is the activity completion settings for a specific assignment in Moodle. So you can see the first checkbox is indicating that a grade must be given for it to be complete, but the second checkbox is indicating that they must receive a passing grade to complete this activity. And then you can see the other boxes allow other options. For example, if there were multiple attempts that you were expecting, you could even have that be the threshold for completion. This is a specific example of a quiz, of a 5-point quiz. So instead of simply using maximum points possible in a traditional assignment, here you can select what the passing grade actually is. And in this case, a 4 out of 5 would be considered 80%, which is what Missy said. Maybe a B is considered passing. And then you can see here that this allows additional attempts, or what grading method it might be, which is to say, take the highest grade that a student earned on any of the attempts that they made. And then here's another example using a rubric. This is a simplified rubric, and many of you are probably familiar with using rubrics on your assignments for specs grading or contract grading. This one is just 3 levels, essentially. Do they meet the specs, partially meet the specs, or do not meet the specs? And this one in particular from Missy's class, they need to get 2s across the board, essentially, to meet competency or meet all the specs. One issue I want to bring up in terms of the mathematics of a grade book, there's our lights, is that it's calculated on points. So in Moodle, for example, any scale, the lowest level of the scale is a 0. So if you're thinking of using a 2-point scale here, mathematically, Moodle is going to only give a 50% if they give 1s. So you can still make it work if you want to use a scale and have the calculations be calculated mathematically by your LMS, but you might need to fudge the scale a little bit because really you're working on a 10-point scale, for example. So just keep that in mind. A 1 would be a 50%, which would be failing. And I'm going to go turn the lights on, everybody.
Sorry about that. We keep running into the problems. Power saving. So how does this translate into an actual grade? How do you get this to actually translate into a grade with all these essentially passes and no passes? So here's an example grading scheme from my fall course, which is biology and nutrition for non-majors. And I use specs grading. So we do have exams to meet my content learning goals. And I have a minimum percent in which they need to achieve to be part of that spec. And then you can see they can take quizzes and they need X number of quizzes passed. Weekly connection responses are discussion board prompts, and they're graded on a rubric, that 012 rubric. And then applied knowledge assessments in the script are all papers. So they get options, and you can see also the flexibility I've built in the applied knowledge papers for like a B or C. They can choose to write papers if they prefer. There's actually 4 papers to choose from. And then they could choose to write dietary analyses. Again, there's 3 of those they can choose from. So they can really kind of go based on their interest and based on their own schedule and where they will have more time, less time. So how does that look when we look at it on the LMS? So this is a screenshot for what we call an activity completion report in Moodle. And my view is this really nice check boxes and X kind of page. Now, students, when they look at it, they will see a list of all the assignments and they will see yes, no for whether or not they pass, so they can count them up. The nice thing about this is I just look at it, and a green checkbox means they did it and they met the specs and they passed. A red X means they did attempt it, but they did not meet the specs, which means they did not pass. That little red box with the blue check is me doing an override. That particular week, actually, we had some technical difficulties, so students had to send me their postings by email. But I also did that sometimes when they did a revision, they were sick or something like that and missed the deadline. So I had to go back in and fix it. And then the blank boxes are just students did not do it. So the nice thing is that at just a glance, I can see how well students are keeping up with their requirements. So like my first student there was not doing so well with their discussion board posts. And so I could reach out to them very quickly and say, hey, listen, you need to start doing these because you have to get X number for the grade that you want. So how does that then compute into final grades? So I can download that activity completion report, and it comes to us in a CSV file like this, where I get these text things completed, achieve pass grade, completed to not achieve pass grade, or not completed. Those are the three options. And all I do for that is then a simple find and replace, and they get turns into ones and zeros. So if they completed it and achieved pass grade, they get a 1. If not, they get a 0. And then I can just add them up. I use Excel for summing, and the exam average is already calculated by Moodle. And then I just put it all on one screen so I can look at it and go down and give them their final grades based on their specs that they've met. So you can kind of see how it looks. Most of my students do all the quizzes. They're very short and easy. So that's usually not a problem. It's usually the exam grade, exam average, and then the number of papers that they do. Sorry, technical difficulties. So pros and cons to this system. It is very inclusive and very transparent. Your assignments have to be written with a lot of clear learning objectives, very clear instructions on what students need to do to pass. The actual initial grading and the revisions grading is super easy because it's a 2-1-0. Everything is already set. The instructions and the description of what they need to do in the assignments are set at a B level. So I just have to make sure that they are matching what it says it do in a B level. And it's just, yes, not quite there, or didn't do it at all. And it's easy then to give feedback on just the ones that they did not do, and they can revise those. The students do have control over their achievement level. Like I said, I have a lot of seniors that just want to do a pass fail on the course, and they just want a C-, and they know exactly what they need to do. I mean, they have to study at some point, but for the rest of the assignments, they know exactly what they need to do. And if they know their department requires a lot of big things for their independent study project at the end, they can front load some of the work. So that's nice. And that then lends to, of course, the flexibility. For the cons, it is a novelty for a lot of my students. It takes a while for them to get a hold of the system. Once they get it, they kind of like it. They like the flexibility. It does require more initial upfront work. You have to have very clear learning objectives. You have to really think out your assignment. You have to make sure things get clear. There's a little iteration process. Oh, that wasn't so clear. I got to fix that up for the next time. And it does require some manual checking of student progress. So I'm in the habit already of giving my students like their midterm grades, and I just look at that screen and I just check it once every week or so and make sure people are on progress. And then I can reach out to students who are falling behind, which is kind of nice that I have regular assignments so I can catch them earlier. But I also have to get them on top of checking that as well. And there is somewhat hand calculation of grades. Now with Moodle and our system, we have to hand upload our grades anyway. I can't just click the button and upload them. So it doesn't matter too much, but all in all, to download the data and then just change things to ones and zeros and do a quick sum, it takes me maybe 15 minutes to do all my grades. So it's really nice that way. So it's a con, but a pro at the same time.
All right. That's all we have.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I will admit that I've been looking at that grade to pass feature in Moodle for years and not quite figuring out what exactly it was for. So that was very useful for me.
Yeah, we had to figure this out because I'm like, I want to do this for my class. And they were like, well, how do we do this in the LMS? And it actually was already there. You just have to hunt for the features. That was the problem. We had to cobble together some features to figure it out. But it's all there. And it was there. We found equivalencies in Canvas and in Blackboard too.
And I guess the last comment I'll make in terms of couching this in terms of inclusivity and flexibility is I just want to give a shout out to all of the faculty who have been doing phenomenal work. I have yet to see, honestly, a faculty member who has not bent over backwards to try to accommodate and encourage students over the last 3 years. But I'm going to say the flip side of the inclusivity piece is if you're using an electronic gradebook and trying to be transparent with the student's progress, if they're not making progress, put the zeros in there kind of thing. I think sometimes we're hoping for an additional retake. We're hoping for allowing a late work, and we don't want to hurt their feeling. We don't want to stress them out, but being transparent means you got to know where you are. And sometimes it seems mythical and mysterious about how their progress is. If Missy drops the lowest 3 grades, she's got to put zeros in there if they missed the quiz. You have to let the calculation stand where it is, and then students have a little more understanding about how they're really doing. Otherwise, because our Moodle gradebook by default skips missing assignments. It just doesn't calculate them into the calculation. So it gives them an inflated sense of confidence that they have A's because the two things they did were passing or A work or whatever grading scheme you're using.
Yeah, it's
So-
a habit to get into to put those zeros in. I do that for my other classes a little more closer to traditional grading. So going in to do that. We had a question about if the seniors have to check their own work. They don't download a CSV. They have a different view. So they have to keep track of the ones they have done. Eric, so they can bring up a screen. I have it set up. I even put a little link in their Moodle and their quick link area. And it will bring up and it just says yes, no's of whether or not they passed. So they can look at that. They get the same kind of idea. It's not the pretty checks, which I think would look nicer. It's just yes or no. So the students can look at a glance and see if they're passing or not. And then Moodle calculates their exam average for them as well. So I do all my exams in Moodle. So that makes it easier for that. So yeah, they don't have to like download anything. They just have to keep track. Did I do 5? Then I needed to do 5. That's, so it's not hard for them. It's just a habit for them to get into. Just like checking their grades in general, which we know they're not great at anyway. Thanks, Eric.
Joe, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, the only problem with the zeros in there is the weighting of the grades too, but sometimes it's good. Sometimes they need the shock that, oh, I was supposed to do those quizzes. I didn't do those quizzes. Yeah.
Well, and I think with the pandemic, with more people using like the LMS and putting assignments in for electronic submissions, of course, you're going to front load. You in the past, you didn't have to maybe enter an electronic grade, but if once you put that assignment into your course and it has a grade attached to it, weeks in advance so that you can use all of the software capabilities of reminding them about upcoming assignments and it appears on the calendar, all those things you want, you have to leave it blank, ignores it because they haven't had an opportunity to do it yet.
Yeah.
But then that just means when you do your assessments, if some of your students are not participating in the assessment and there is a penalty for that, you need to put it in there.